on Monday night, and we're going to get right into it. By the way, if you look in the background, you notice this is not the Mitchell Talks studio. We're down here at Mountain Vista. Our friends Jerry and Shay Isbell. This is their place, and we're down here. And the people who have not been to the Beavers Bend area, what's happening in Ho Chi Town and Broken Bow, you got to get down here and see this. And so, anyway, this was planned for us to be here. And so he's got great Wi-Fi. We're going to come to you tonight from Mountain Vista. And thanks to Jerry and Shay for hosting us down here this weekend. Going to get right into a guy who's been on top of the story we're going to lead with tonight, which is what happened at the Board of County Commissioners in Oklahoma County. We've been covering this for some time. Barry Mangold, good to see you, man. How are you?
Hey, happy to be here, Scott. Just working on the story for 10, but no, always happy to stop by. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You got a tease for us at 10?
It's talking turnpikes. All right, that's all I'll say for right now. But yeah, we're talking turnpikes and kind of legislation and some efforts to change what's planned for down in Norman.
Interesting. Okay, that's going to be. We'll be watching that at 10 o'clock. We're also down in the Louisiana. Got to go to the app. So you don't have the News 9 app to get it. If you're going to be down here at Mountain Vista, you need to get that app. So anyway, look forward to that, Barry. All right. You've been on this for some time, and you broke a story last week, which is basically this bond issue that was generated today. The county commissioners have, well, just go ahead and explain. Let's find out what happened at the Board of County Commissioners today, and then we'll get into the what ifs.
Well, we talked on Friday, or I talked on Friday with the different county commissioners, and essentially it was kind of breaking a story that probably wasn't a big surprise to many people. I know that we've been talking about a new jail for a long time, certainly all the issues at the Oklahoma County Jail between inmate deaths, between health inspections, between staffing issues, between drug trafficking kind of happening inside of the jail, and just a lot of long-term issues that and management of the jail not certainly should be included, but certainly a lot of issues being talked about for a long time. And so on Friday, I just simply asked the county commissioners, how do you plan to vote on Monday? And of course, just to back up a moment, what happened earlier today was the county commissioners voted to put something on the ballot. And what they're putting on the ballot is a bond question, essentially asking, should the county issue $260 million in bond funding for the purpose of building a new jail? Prior to this vote, there's a big discussion on should the county rebuild the jail, a new facility, new location, or should they renovate or repair the current jail? As we saw, all three commissioners this morning voted to go for this bond vote, essentially saying, and I know you're going to be we're going to be hearing from some county commissioners themselves here in a little bit, so you'll be able to talk to them, Scott. But with this vote, county commissioners are certainly at least saying that a new rebuilding the jail should certainly be something that the voters decide on and should at least weigh in on. And so now we know that there will be a vote in the June 28th election and people will see on their ballot should the county be issuing $260 million for a new jail. And so that's what's going to be on the ballot. We talked to each commissioner on Friday, or I did, and did the story kind of confirming what ended up happening today, that all three county commissioners would vote to have this put onto a ballot. And we'll have to see what happens in June.
All right. So let's start with get to first base.
Mm-hmm.
If the bond issue passes, do they have enough money to build a new jail?
So that's the really interesting part. So what we saw through the CJAC, which is this great big body a great big agency that of kind of local and of local law enforcement and government officials. I won't get too into that because CJAC is a pretty kind of a complicated deal. Essentially, what the county was looking at was a $300 million project. The estimate that came out of CJAC and all this research and this firm that they hired, building a new jail with everything that the county wants, is $300 million. The bond issue is $260 million. Certainly a huge chunk of that $300 million project. There's still that $40 million gap left. And again, you'll probably hear from the commissioners about this, but that last $40 million, I talked about that a little bit in the story on Friday on exactly how will that gap be filled. Depends on which commissioner you ask. One idea that is on the table for commissioners is to use federal funding to free up $40 million of general revenue or normal kind of revenue. And I say normal as in not federal, because one big debate that we've had over the past year or so is, can this federal pandemic relief funding be used for the jail? The answer to that is now. It was less certain before. It is pretty certain that the answer is no. So getting kind of thinking of ideas of how to kind of free up the funding, using the federal money for standard or routine county expenses, and then taking that saved money and putting it towards the jail, that is one idea. Commissioner Carrie Bloomer told me on Friday that she cannot say, right, I'm looking at my notes, she said that she cannot say if she's supportive of that, because those federal dollars could go towards rental assistance or a number of different programs, as they were kind of designed for pandemic relief. But there are guys, I'm not going to say what they should be used for. It's more of a question of what can they be used for, and that's kind of where the question is now. It's kind of, how can these federal dollars be used, and can they ultimately be put towards that $40 million gap in the jail funding? The other commissioners I talked with, Brian Mon and Kevin Calvi, they were very supportive of the idea of using $40 million of the county's $77 million in ARPA funding. So it's just about 50%, just over 50% of this funding will go towards the jail, not directly, but indirectly. So that'll still leave the county with some ARPA funding. And also, all of that, Scott, is based on the assumption that the construction will in fact cost $300 million. A lot of that may change. I'm not a contractor myself, but I know that nothing is really stable or predictable with the economy at the moment, especially when it comes to transport and getting construction up. So that is a kind of an assumption that it's kind of hard to assume all the time. The $300 price tag that is. So that's going to be an ongoing question that commissioners will probably want to figure out before June 28th, because it'll be good to, I can imagine it would be good to tell voters, hey, there's still this $40 million gap that will be there, even if you vote yes on this, but here's how we're going to fill that gap. So it's the last piece, certainly not a small piece, but I would say the last piece of the puzzle, because the big piece is getting voters to say yes on this $260 million bond issue.
Which was something that we had probably 3 months ago. We first started talking to Commissioner Mon. He said there are these, because this is the once in a lifetime opportunity. I think Commissioner Calvi's statement to you this weekend was do or die.
Correct.
And so Commissioner Mon is having to figure out how to get money from all these different pots. We've had Chairman Kennedy from the state House of Representatives talking about, even though he lives in Cleveland County, this building is used for DOC purposes. This is a really important building. Let me ask you this, Barry. What happens if it fails?
Well, one of the reasons why county commissioners are calling this a once in a lifetime opportunity, or really a do or die moment, is because of the timing. Right now, I haven't gone back and researched these old bond issues. So my understanding is that back in 2008, there were bond issues that the county approved of and went forward with, and that raised tax rates a little bit. That raised property tax rates, and now, and this year, those bonds are going down. They are sunsetting is one term, but they are going away this year. And one of the reasons why this bond item for the new jail is so kind of perfect in the minds of commissioners and county officials is because it essentially creates the same tax increase that voters passed and have been paying since 2008. So now, if voters approve of this new jail bond vote, they'll be effectively not adding onto that 2008 bond or reducing it. They'll be just continuing it. So it'll result in essentially no change in your property tax rates. And of course, there is a little fluctuation every year, but that is the magic of the moment, is the fact that that tax rates would stay the same if this bond is approved. And I know that passing bonds, huge challenge to it is when you have to raise taxes in order to do it, and that's how you convince voters. And I know that communicating the issue and making it financially feasible are kind of two different things. the financial feasibility of it, it's that's where this timing comes in. That's why it's a kind of a do or die moment, as you've heard. The problem is, this worth the money? Is this worth the time and effort? We've been talking for a couple decades about the problems at the jail, so that I'll leave that up to you. But yeah, certainly communicating the problem has been a big part of what the folks at CJAC. You may have seen Tim Tartabono from CJAC on TV for a couple months, because he was kind of making the case of why repairing was not feasible or worthwhile, and that replacement was the way to go. And I suspect that we're going to be seeing a lot of county officials making that same argument to voters over the next few months.
I know that in the past 3 months that we've been looking at this in depth, that folks who work in mental health have said that building won't work. And they've just been clear about that. This is not advocates for or against. They're just saying this one's not going to work, even though there have been demonstrable improvements to the old building. As you said, it's been controversial forever. And, and one of the things that's going to be interesting is if it were to fail, which Commissioner Mon has said this, I'll hit him up about it again tonight, which was it, and protesters have been using this statistic. They're saying, hey, we're going to have more deaths than Rikers Island. And so my question to these folks, I want to talk to them in the long run, is if this goes down, what is your expectation that it's ever going to get better? There are some real interesting questions.
I think a really good point that advocates for a new jail have made is the design purpose of the current jail. The medical unit at the top of the jail. I've been to it. It's a repurposed holding unit, holding cells. So it's certainly none of the rooms, like the mental treatment, the drug treatment, and the medical treatment rooms there. It's just the rooms in that jail are being used in ways they were not meant to be used. And I know Commissioner Calvi told me yesterday, or no, I'm sorry, it was Commissioner Mon told me yesterday that the building is 32 years old. It had a 30-year lifespan. So it's but even beyond the idea of a lifespan of a building, I just think that you have so many parts of that jail being used for things it was not meant to be used for. It has been over capacity for years. It's the standard of capacity has just gone up, because it's impossible to keep the building at capacity as it stands now. That also kind of, but to the kind of looking at both sides of the argument, I know that management of the jail has changed significantly in just the past few years. Went from the sheriff's office to the county now, which is now being managed by the jail trust, or the criminal justice authority, as it's formerly known. And so does it really just does it take a better manager, or does it need a new building? That's the main question. And because so many folks, whether you realize it or not, so many folks in and around Oklahoma County interact with the jail, and it can really just the experience that you have in there, it can right now it can be a life or death situation, unfortunately, in a lot of ways. Of course, but yeah, I know that the new building, the proposed building, I won't say new, I'll say proposed building, does have dedicated space for mental health treatment and things like that. But then you get back into the question of funding, because remember that $40 million gap? Well, what if that's not filled? What if federal funding doesn't go towards that? Carrie Bloomer told me on Friday that she would certainly prefer a smaller jail. So maybe you just take the $260 million and work with that. In that case, what is being dropped from the original design and from the original proposed design? So there's a whole lot of questions about how exactly it could move forward. That last $40 million gap, I believe, will be something that we get more answers on between now and June, when we all go to vote. But once we vote, whether the bond is approved or denied, we'll have fewer questions on how to move forward from there. And because obviously, if it gets shot down, then we're back to square one on how to deal with it. And this perfect timing aspect does go away. But if it does pass, then it's kind of a question of, all right, what does it look like exactly? How do we get that last $40 million funding? $40 million in funding. And so I think we're going to be this will be an issue that we get a lot of information on in the next 2 months or the month and a half that we have before we all vote.
I know in 90, 120 days of covering this issue, we've not run into one, what I would say, credible organization or entity that's involved in all the sort of services across the board that converge there at the jail that are saying this building is tenable for the future. And it's interesting because most of their predictions are very dire from those folks: mental health, State Department of Health, North Care, the City Chamber of Commerce. It's all dire if it doesn't happen. And when folks start saying that, look at Rikers Island, that sort of stuff. Well, I don't know. It's hard for me to understand how you improve or how that future is not more of what at present. I mean, how many more people are going to die if nothing happens? That's a question that has to be answered, and I'm sure will be debated.
And that's a question that unfortunately will be rightfully up front and center if this vote does go down, because that's the issue right now. That's the fear and the worry right now, is that this is leading to unnecessary loss of life. And of course, with detention centers, deaths do happen, but I know that 6 deaths so far in 2022, that should be concerning for a lot of people, and that should be, and I think it clearly is for county officials. How exactly to go about it, again, is always a question you end up with, because I remember back in the when there were meetings about when there were meetings with design firms that researched the jail, then they were proposing rebuilding or renovating. The renovation option costed about $270 million. So really not that much less than rebuilding. But when it came to getting in all the services in spaces designed for those services, that's where I think a lot of folks landed on the building a new jail. Because it's having a 13-story jail is certainly not ideal for the folks that got to move in and out of that jail frequently.
Well, certainly we want to listen to all the voices on this. To me, it's ironic that a lot of the folks that are against the jail, building a new jail, are using numbers which to me beg the question of how can it possibly get better if we don't do anything? To me, I haven't figured the logic out on that one, but we want to hear more from them. And I think over the next, what are we talking about? June the 28th. How long? So
less than 2 months, or about, something like that. No, just over 2 months. Either way, don't make me do math right now. But either way, I think, hey, it's election season. It's time It's a time to listen to a lot of different folks, and I know that you can go to the jail trust meeting and hear from a lot of different folks pretty consistently, because there are definitely a lot of advocates that are that very much communicate the importance and the significance of the urgency of this moment and the urgency of this problem. There's one that's there routinely, Christopher Johnson. I've heard him say over and over, we need to stop the bleeding. And it's very much, he's talking about the active and current problem. And I know there have been advocates for a whole lot of ideas with what to do with jail. But I know that this ballot question, this bond issue, will be one of the more significant votes that Oklahoma, it feels like at least one of the more significant votes that Oklahoma County residents will make, that doesn't have to do with electing someone, and this will really decide the future of one of the more problematic buildings in the county.
Well, great job, Barry. Thanks for what you've done. The last 72 hours have been a whirlwind. And I mean, a lot of us saw it because we've been looking at this closely. And you really, from Friday night, wow, this was going to happen. And it happened. And now we've got less than 90 days to see where this goes. Barry Mangold, got to get you back to work. Looking forward to your 10 o'clock. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Scott. See you around.
See you around. All right. We're going to take a shift now and bring in guy in the middle of this. Is kind of like the hurricane, right in the middle of the eye of the hurricane. The commissioner who, we've been talking 90 days about this, and you said this is it. This is Commissioner Cowley said do or die, but you said this is one in a lifetime. And can I just jump into some of the things we talked about with Barry? Let's start with people who are saying we want a smaller jail. Understand that, and they're talking about things that are happening and deaths and things like that. All legitimate issues we should be discussing. But let's just get the big question would be, what if this didn't pass?
I think basically it's a complete stall out. I think if this doesn't happen, for advocates who want to say advocate for just a mental health facility and leave this jail alone, I don't think you're going to get these people together in the community ever again without years to pass. I mean, you look at half of the city council has come in the last 4 or 5 years. You have chamber leadership, you have others in the civic community world, that this is kind of their swan song moment. And the institutional knowledge, take for instance, Roy Williams, the president of the Oklahoma City Chamber. He served on the jail committee like 11 years ago, and he's just announced his retirement. He's leaving this year. And so this isn't just something he got briefed on here just in a couple of months. This is something he's been submerged in as a non-elected official, but a community advocate for a decade or more. And so you have all of these people collectively around. You also have the window of time where you can bring something forward to the public that isn't being convoluted with another bond or another sales tax that's being considered by other governmental entities. Timing is everything. The other thing is we've bought off the Department of Justice for a long time with a great deal of patience and grace, because they've recognized we've made the strides we could make within the resources we had at our disposal. And we kept working on innovative ways to reduce the jail population. And by the way, this is kind of a bit of an exclusive. We actually dipped below 1,400 this weekend, which is, just tremendous. True, we always go down in the spring and the summer, and it goes up when the weather gets bad in the winter, people seeking shelter. But this is huge, and that shows that we've done everything we can do with existing resources. But Scott, since 1984, the population of Oklahoma County has doubled, and essentially, or in the metro area. And so by that, the jail that was built in 1990, opened in 1991, it was designed for a population almost half of what we got now. To talk about building a jail smaller, as some are advocating, is, just going to fly directly in the face of what the Department of Justice is on us about in the first place, which is having potential for overcrowding. All right. So the argument is, well, if you don't build it bigger, then people have to continue to find ways to do it. Well, even proportionally, just off of statistical data alone, when the population continues to grow, even if we're making tremendous innovative strides, we're still going to have an X percentage of population that's going to have to be incarcerated, even if it's only temporary. And I think that that's what we're showing. We've kept the numbers down while the population for Oklahoma County is blowing through the roof. We've also had an aggressive prosecution team here in the last decade who have filed no shortage of felonies, maybe as much as rivaling metro areas like in New York, it's been famously pointed out. So it's not because the prosecution here that's been elected is opting to go soft on crime, quote unquote. This is keeping up in par with just exactly what everybody was fearful about, and we're on track to have even more. So we have to address the facility, and as Barry mentioned, we've run out of the lifespan of this, even if it was treated correctly, and we all know it was overused and completely not taken care of, deferred maintenance and other issues that date back, I want to point out, before any of the current elected officials were even here. So I'm not even slapping some of the other fellow elected officials or things. This was just stuff that has gone on for a very long time. It's a 31-year-old problem that our community is dealing with. And I think this is, like Calvi said, a do or die moment.
So what I just heard you say is that the DOJ standards, which we've lived in fear of in this county for a very, very long time, are what really are driving the size of the building that the commissioners, or at least a couple of commissioners, are proposing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a factor in consideration. And, someone said, well, you're fear-mongering. I'm not trying to fear-monger about Department of Justice. I don't know that it's imminent that they come in just immediately if this fails on June 28th. But I don't think that any of us thought we could maybe get as long as we have. But we've very successfully advocated to them what we've tried to do. I think they've given recognition to us for doing that. But they also have expected us at some point to do something. What you said to Barry a while ago is spot on. To do nothing is absolutely the wrong answer. We have to do something. Now, previously, I advocated for an annex or a satellite facility. Well, that's if we could have addressed this 8 or 9 years ago. But 8 or 9 years later on this building that, again, I mentioned has already exceeded its original lifespan, is no longer an option. Plus, the population trends 8 or 9 years ago were far less than they are now. So now we have new data. Just kind of like we got new guidelines from the Treasury Department. Things continue to change, and we have to be able to respond in real time as best we can. But in doing this, we're planning for the future. And if we get this built, just as much as it's a once-in-a-life opportunity to do it, that is also true about we've got to do this for the next couple of generations probably. A building this time that hopefully will last 40 or 50 years instead of 30 like this one was designed for. And you can't imagine Oklahoma City, Oklahoma County reducing in population tremendously over the next 50 years, probably just the opposite. So we've got to plan for the future also.
Okay, now in terms of the timing on this, you had said some time ago, you've got these buckets you've got to fill, and this bond issue is coming up. Some folks are going to say, I've already heard some of this, well, they're trying to rush this through, the funding through, before they really get down to telling us what the building is going to be like. Can you address why that the hurry to get this bond issue situation versus put everything out on the table on building the building right now, or what would be transparently in this building? Tell us why some people are going to say the cart's before the horse.
Well, first off, as Barry pointed out, it is correct that these current bonds that were previously approved are dropping off. But Scott, what we're proposing to do is be able to do this without raising taxes. It approves the previous rate that was already approved by the voters in 2008. It would just continue it on flatline like they've been accustomed to paying. We're not coming to them for a sales tax increase. We're not going around looking for a federal bailout. Well, we have already been given with these ARPA funds. And what we have within our existing resources, combined with continuing that rate at the bond that has already been issued before by the voters, if they will renew that, then I think we can build this all without going for a tax increase above what they're used to paying now. That is huge. That's the once in a lifetime opportunity I'm talking about. Why do it now is because, of course, the bonds are dropping off, and it's always harder to do it when bonds have dropped off. And then you're asking people to re-increase their rates instead of just renewing them at the same rate. But also, again, back with the Department of Justice, I don't know how long we have to wait. I'm no longer in the position of wanting to taunt them and trying to see how long we can keep this thing going. I think that it's time for us to leave, because now we have the first time pragmatic solution that I think is realistic. I have not wanted to bring something before the voters prior because I didn't think it was realistic. This is something we can do. Now, Barry's pointed out, and others have mentioned in the news stories about this has got a 40 million gap. We recognize that, but I think that what we have is, number one, an opportunity for more development in Oklahoma County that will probably make these bonds generate more than it's being projected, but you can't count on that. So we can only count on what's established now. But even if that does flatline and say we go through some sort of a recession, I believe that we are already identifying many funds within our existing revenue where we can do what the federal government has called, and they've termed it this, supplanting. What that means is these ARPA funds, while they can't be used for directly building a new facility as a jail, they can be used in a number of legal matters. I mean, it's a plethora of ways and options that they can be used. If those are expenses that the county was otherwise bearing and it replaces those dollars, it then theoretically frees up those bucks where they can be applied for the construction of the jail out of our existing ongoing general revenue that we have at the county. I think that we can do that 1 year retroactive and 3 years in the future. That's the way the Congressional Act reads. So being able to do that, and I know that's sort of complicated to run through very quickly, but I think that we are able to take that and fund at least every bit of that $40 million shortage. I'm extremely confident that we have even other options that I haven't even just discussed now. So we have backup plans that have backup plans, but it requires the passage of this bond. If the people do not approve this on June 28th, then all of this doesn't really even matter, because we have to have the $260 million guaranteed from those bonds.
Last question. There was another item that the commissioners passed today about a oversight committee. Tell us what that's about. Do you know who's going to be on it? How will they be involved in helping temper some of the concerns about how this is going to look after the bond issue passes, if that happens.
Well, and to finish answering your previous question about the design, we have had a design brought out in commissioner meetings, which has been explained before, about a rendering of what we would like the facility ideally to look like. So that has been rolled out. If the funding didn't come in total, then that would obviously have to be reduced, but it's not what we're starting out with now. We know that we want a $300 million ideally facility that would accommodate both the mental health, increased healthcare options, and housing for the medical units, and of course additional space, but different kind of incarceration space, like a direct supervision barrack style bunking, which has proved to be way more successful than the maximum security cells that we have now. And then, with regards to the oversight committee, that was my request. I wanted to bring it out and do it in conjunction with this, so that day one, the voters know that I intend to have a blue ribbon citizen oversight committee like they've become accustomed to seeing with Oklahoma City's maps, meaning that it is not just going to take the trust in the elected officials at the table. It will also have to pass multiple smell tests with citizens overseeing it, and it's going to be extraordinarily transparent. That was, for whatever reason, something not done whenever they put this through 32 years ago. And I think that had a number of these things that we later found out with flaws with the contractors and stuff like that would have never, ever flown past a citizen oversight committee. So I think that it was important to tell voters day one that that's what we intend to do. And we announced today that it would come out very shortly after the passage of this on June 28th, where we would name the people who would oversee it and how the makeup of that would work. But it was a commitment unanimously passed by the county commissioners today to say that is emphatically what would happen should they entrust us with this vote on June 28th.
Well, there's a lot of ground between June the 28th and all three commissioners said yes going forward. And so there's going to be a campaign. Do you think this will be one of those paid for campaigns, or is this an earned media campaign over the next 2.5 months?
Well, my understanding, since Senator Inhofe announced his retirement, that ad rates on TV stations have dramatically increased. So I know that for whatever money we're able to raise for a public advocacy campaign, and it's important to point out we're not allowed to use taxpayer money, so this is all going to have to come from citizen advocacy. It will largely depend on a lot of word of mouth. I'm certainly going to go around and try to speak and explain this to any group. If there's anyone out there who would like me to come speak to a group, large or small, I'm happy to make myself available to do it. Anyone can always call or text me 405-824-3120. That is my personal cell phone, 824-3120. Happy to answer any questions, even the tough ones. And I'll be happy to try to bridge any gaps of people who are still just not quite sure what they're being asked to consider. And I think that that's in large part how this thing will be probably communicated throughout this busy campaign season. We've got the governor and 2 U.S. Senate races and lots of local races. It's a bunch of noise to cut through.
It sure is. And we'll do our best to try to do something really regular as we get down to this countdown for justice, yay or nay, however that you define what justice is. This is going to be a big deal. And this is something that I'm hoping the media gets into it a little more. It's been our pleasure to really get into this for the last 90 days. Thanks for all your help. But, Commissioner, we've had a lot of folks who probably not on the same political spectrum as you, who've been on these streams saying this has got to be done. And I think that, which I would find to be folks that are ideologically different than you. All across the spectrum, mental health and politics, and they're saying this has got to be done. All right, so we'll see if there's going to be a real organized opposition to this. Otherwise, it's up to the voters to make up their minds. So we'll try to do what we can to bring as much of the conversation from both sides forward on this. And really appreciate what you've been
tremendous. You've really been tremendous, and thank you for having me and giving me so much time to explain it. I get it that it's a very convoluted issue, but back to the election date. You often see these kind of propositions brought forward on an obscure day that's got no other thing likely on the ballot of any real major significance. And to show you the confidence and the transparency that this Board of County Commissioners is trying to do, we've probably put it on the highest turnout ballot that there will be this year. There are active Democrat and Republican primaries that are going to be going on this day. And so this was done in full transparency. So this is not something we're trying to run under people's nose and do real quickly. We're having it out there in front of everybody. We could have done this on April 5th. If the mayor had been up for a runoff, there might have been a mayor's race on the ballot. We couldn't have known that because it would have had been a decision before the mayor's primary. But as it turns out, there wasn't. And I think if we had put it on that ballot, we would have seen probably less than 8% of the registered voters that are eligible to weigh in on this try to commit people to this property tax, with the bond. And so we're doing this in the full transparency with hoping to have a record turnout for a county bond issue. And that is how important this is, and also how confident we are about the proposal we're bringing forward.
Appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stand by for more of this. We'll be talking to you. And then folks who may even be disagreeing with you, we'd like to focus them. If they're making an argument that's voters need to hear, we'd like to hear it. You may know as you go out that there was a little bit of a change in the Your Vote Counts team this weekend, and it was one of the most fun. You may remember there's an old timer that we brought back on Sunday. You may know him. Let me throw him. I know you got to go, but let me throw him in here. He's kind of hard of hearing, so be real careful when I bring him in. There he is.
There I am.
It's an old timer that came back.
How are you, Richard?
Old timer, hard of hearing. Who could play this game, Mr. Mitchell?
Well, that's all. Huh?
I said, who could play this game?
Okay, Brian's got to go. Brian's got to go, but listen, thanks, Commissioner, and it's the Richard Morissette Show now, so we'll talk to you real soon.
Representative, always good to see you.
You too, Brian. Hard work you're doing. Keep at it. Thanks for representing South Oklahoma City, by the way.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, see you soon. Bye-bye. Well, I was going to do a kind of a long intro for you, and then I thought, no, let's have some fun with the old guys.
Just do it.
For those folks who remember the guys that laid the foundation for our Sunday program, which is still number one in the state. And it began, Richard, I think it's 15 years ago we began Your Vote Counts with you.
It was 2007. Right.
Yeah. And it began quickly. You remember in the old days, we were on at 4:00 on Thursdays.
That's right.
And we did them live.
That's right.
That?
Oh, I do. I remember one time, you're not going to believe this. I know you'll believe it, but I remember one time I was getting hot. That didn't happen very often, but I said something about Governor Boren, and I said that Governor Boren had his head up in the clouds, and it was live TV, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And I had to think very fast to come up with something that was appropriate, and that's what I came up with. Live TV is definitely an animal one has got to get used to. But I like it,
Yeah. And we had Colby Schwartz. And there has been, all right, so the tree has been Randy Terrell. It's well documented, Randy's exit from the legislature. I'd like to talk to him. I don't know. I really would.
I would too.
Then the replacement at that point became Colby Schwartz. Yes. Then State Representative Colby Schwartz. And then it became State Representative Leslie Osborne, now Commissioner of Labor, right? And then Majority Leader Eccles. But while we can do these throwbacks. The one throwback is always going to be Morissette because there's only been two Democrats. It's Representative Morissette. How long were you on Your Vote Counts?
Well, from the origination in 2007 to the end of the 2016 year, I believe, was I left there. So, yeah, how long was that? That was
it's like 11 years.
11 years, long time, yeah. Right?
So when Colby walked in studio the other day, and I can't tell you how many people I got messages from, and listen, it was a lot of old timers too, but some young folks going, who are these guys? I want two quick stories. Number one was we have a great staff of techs at Griffin. And one of the guys sends me with the digital team, sends me the tape every weekend after they're done, the log. And he said, look, I did a double take when I saw the guys on. So he Googled us. And he saw several of the Colby, Richard, Your Vote Counts. And he goes, well, these guys are great. Where did you find them? I'm like, Oh, found them a long time ago, bro. A long time. And so we just called it retro. And so Jason and John are not going anywhere, but you're going to see a lot of retro.
Good. I think based on the response we got yesterday, and you got them too, I think it's energetic. I think it's a good thing. And now, I was never really saddled before, but now that I'm not in office, I can really let it fly. And I'm going to tell you something. I did it before Donald Trump did it, but Donald Trump had a way of getting blunt and talking directly to people. And I've tried to tell young politicians that speak the truth, speak your mind, and be strong, and people will follow you. Political speak and covering, for example, ex-senator from Kansas, Bob Dole. When you met Bob Dole personally, he was alive and energetic. And then when he got on TV, he was just this stoic statue type guy. If he had just been himself, he may have been president. But he was so stiff in public, he was not himself. So I always tell young politicians, be yourself. Have energy, be strong, have courage. By the way, I have a few opinions about this jail thing.
Go ahead. Go ahead and share that with us.
Okay, Brian, if you're listening, my good friend Brian Mon and Kevin Calvi is a friend. Calvin and I have been adversaries and friends for many years. But Scott, I'm going to tell you something. I've been going to the jail since its inception. I've been practicing criminal law in Oklahoma County now for 36 years. I've been in that jail more times than now that I have hairs on my head. And that jail does need to be either replaced or refurbished or remodeled. But this idea that we have to pass a bond in June, what was the term you always used on the show? Henny penny, or which one's the sky?
That was your term. Yeah, henny penny was your. Yeah.
Right. The sky is falling. The sky is not falling. Okay. Let's have some innovative ideas here. Why do we have to have one central location for a jail? I don't know how many empty public school buildings we still have standing around that can be used. They remodel them for mental health. For health facilities. We have one at 44th and Walker. What's the name of the health outpatient health facility there that remodeled that school? There's one downtown. I don't know. I just wonder why all of a sudden, after all these years, it's a do or die vote. And by the way, here it comes. And when this passes, Scott, I want you to say to Representative Morissette said it first on this show. This bond is going to pass overwhelmingly. Okay? The voters in Oklahoma County have changed. It's no longer a pure red county. You know that. It's now purple. And people that are advocates of jail change are very well aware of what to do. And those people are going to be motivated to vote. And they will vote. And they will vote yes. Those that are against it are going to go, well, I don't know what's going on. Who knows? And I give it a 65% margin of victory, 65-35 on the June ballot. Now, that is a County Commissioner Mon and Kevin would never say that publicly. But I'm offering that. And I mean, every bond, I shouldn't say every bond, but bonds are in the habit of being passed these days. Have you noticed? When was the last bond that wasn't passed? I can't remember. And by the way, this is a tax increase. I'm sorry. And one thing nobody ever talks about is our county assessors, and especially here in Oklahoma County. There is a law that the legislature passed before I got there that gives the county assessors the authority to increase taxes 5% every year without question. And they've been doing it. God bless his soul, Leonard Sullivan, and under the current administration, it's just automatic. Have you looked at your tax bill over the last 10 years, your ad valorem tax, Scott? Do you realize how much it's gone up? No one ever addresses that. So if you have a 30-year bond, multiply that every 30 years by a 5% tax increase, valuation increase by your county assessors. So that is a tax. That's a massive tax increase. And yet two of the most conservative members that I know, politicians, Brian and Kevin, are against increasing taxes. This is exactly what this is. Now, find me a politician or ex-politician, Scott, that'll say what I just said.
Not many Democrats. By the way, let me just turn this to this deal. You're still famously a Democrat and have been your whole life.
Yes.
you're watching what's happening over on the television. I mean, there's some people going after the governor pretty hard right now.
Yeah, they are. They're all trying, by the way.
You were around at the time of the Dukakis Bush campaign. You tell a great story, by the way, about meeting Bush 41 when he was VP. Wasn't he VP whenever you encountered him in New Hampshire?
Yeah, when I was the story's kind of long to tell, but that was right before Ronald Reagan and him had a debate in Nashua at the Nashua Telegraph. And when he came into the real quick story, and I was in the New Hampshire legislature, and he was all in his Brooks Brothers, all shining in the little well, it was a rather large breakfast place. All these workers and snowplow drivers and lumberjacks were in there, and they were all just busy eating breakfast. And everybody was ignoring the ambassador. That'd be George H.W. Bush, who had been ambassador to China, ambassador to the UN. And I called him that. Just got his attention. And make a long story short, he implored me to vote for him in that primary in March of 1980. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't. And he looked forlorn and he said, well, why not? And I said, well, I'm a Democrat, but I wish you luck anyway. And by the way, in New Hampshire that year, he had that thing sewed up. He had that election sewed up. If he had won that primary, Ronald Reagan would not have been president. But Ronald Reagan grabbed the microphone, of course, as you recall history. And Mr. Breen was the editor of the Nashua Telegraph. And Ronald Reagan's crew had bought the airtime out of Boston so the southern tier of New Hampshire could read. Anyway, Ronald Reagan grabs that microphone and said, Mr. Breen, I'm paying for this. Please let these other guys debate. And the place went nuts. And that catapulted him to victory in New Hampshire and onward to the presidency.
And
I
then he
met Ronald
became VP.
Reagan, by the way. And anyway, that's a long story too. I don't need to get into it, but he was not as nice as people would like to remember, but we'll leave it at that.
Well, where I was going with the question was, you're seeing what's happening with the governor, and does these ads that are going on right now give you a little reminder, the little Willie Horton?
Oh, absolutely. That Willie Horton thing was an absolute groundbreaker. I mean, Willie Horton got George Bush the presidency and you remember that. I mean, it was a deplorable commercial that twisted the truth all twisted around, but it was quite effective. And by the way, I think it was the gentleman in Florida that was convicted and Trump pardoned him. Stone, is that his name?
Yes.
He was the one that came up with that, by the way. And he had worked for Nixon, and he was the one that came up with that idea, and he was the author of that commercial.
We should make sure for history buffs out there, we're talking about Willie Horton, the convicted murderer, not the left fielder for the Tigers. It's a whole
By
different
the way,
deal.
Scott, I want to tell you, I've got your Al Kaline 307 hits hanging on my conference room wall.
It's awesome. It's awesome. We lost Al Kaline.
Yes, we
last
did.
year.
And again, another guy I met, but anyway, more stories, but whatever. But
The guy that jersey was a fellow by the name of John Motil.
John Motil.
Late John Motil worked for Community Health Charities, who played for the Tigers, and during the Billy Martin days. And one time I asked him, I said, John, when you were at the show, he's a big guy. John was 6'7", 6'8", and he was in there between the Mayo Smith Tigers and the Billy Martin Tigers. And I said, when the pitching coach comes out to talk to you, John, what did the pitching coach say? And he said, the pitching coach said, throw bleeping strikes, and he'd walk off. And I'm like, okay, I can do that.
Thank you very much. Right.
Yeah. All right. So the question I had for you on this sort of thing is, do you see this Willie Horton type ad, or reminiscent of the Willie Horton ad, doing anything to this governor?
I think it's a very effective commercial, and they keep repeating it over. But the question is, Scott, who is going to challenge the governor? Hoffmeister? She's not going to make it. Okay, she's not going to make it. I mean, he's the incumbent governor. He's loaded. There's not enough there to defeat him in a Republican primary. I haven't seen any polls. I don't know if you have or not. But there's no way this guy's going to get beat unless he does something incredibly stupid. He's not going to get beat. And, of course, the Democrats, who are we running? Willy-nilly, or who's running? I don't know. But it doesn't really matter. Hoffmeister should have stayed as a Democrat. I know that sounds a little nuts. Or filed as an independent. I don't know. At least you don't have a primary that way. But it's going to get reelected. He's just too strong with the Republican base for anything else.
All right, so let me switch around to what's happening on the national level. Because Sunday, on Your Vote Counts, you were a little harsh on your party.
I wasn't as harsh as I should have been.
Are they going to keep the House and the Senate?
No, absolutely. They're going to get annihilated. Okay, as they should get annihilated. Okay, they have under Biden's watch. We have lost We didn't lose Afghanistan. We simply cut and run. We left our equipment there. We just left. The inflation has gone through the roof. The handling of the COVID pandemic has been a disaster. Never mind the situation on our southern border. Inflation, the absolute weak-kneed, mamby-pamby way he's dealt with Putin. You know, obviously, Joe Biden didn't spend much time on the street as a kid, because when you deal with a bully, the only way to deal with a bully is to go up to him and either punch him in the face, slap him, or do something in order to get his attention. Because if you keep thinking he's going to stop bullying you by being nice, you know, maybe he learned that from Obama, when Obama said, if you cross the line in the sand, which they did, I don't know how many times in Syria, especially when they gashed their own children. Biden is an absolute utter disaster. And there's no way he can save himself now. It's too late even to get reelected. So he's going to bow out. He's not going to run, because they're going to claim he's either got Alzheimer's or something. I don't know what. But this is the worst presidency in my lifetime. And I've been around a little bit longer than you have.
You're going to throw Biden in with Jimmy Carter?
Jimmy Carter looks like Abraham Lincoln, like I said yesterday. And by the way, I met Jimmy Carter was around. And Jimmy Carter was a good man. Some unfortunate circumstances, etc. But this president is willfully behaving in a way that is hurting this country. And the idea of giving away free money in the early part of his presidency during the pandemic, any economics 101 student would know, when you pass out free money, you disincentivize work, and you create the opportunity for inflation, which is exactly what's happened. Never mind the energy industry. Scott, you know that even if you increase production, we talked about this after the show on Sunday, there's no increased oil refining capacity. We don't have any ability to increase the capacity to refine gasoline. So even if you drill more, you're not going to get more, correct? I mean, they don't understand energy. You know, I grew up back east, and I would admit I didn't know anything about energy either until I relocated here to energy country. And people back east do not understand the oil and gas industry, not one iota, which is a shame, because they should.
Let me, the little time that we have left, I want to go to something happier. So I was looking today at the, I'm a Reds fan, which means I'm going to watch a AAA team all summer. The Red Sox, who really I thought were going to be in good shape. We're going to be in the series, and then they kind of laid an egg 2 or 3 games there. So you're famously a Red Sox fan, but tell folks what you've been doing in terms of you're personally involved in baseball, and you're doing senior league.
Well,
games right now.
When I was in the legislature, I didn't have a chance to do this stuff, but I've had a chance now to participate in 2 Red Sox fantasy camps in January of 2020 and this past January down in Fort Myers. Played with other guys around the country. Was managed by Rich Gedman, Rico Petrocelli, and was it Kent Falk, the guy that threw the last pitch of the 04 World Series when the Red Sox won? Playing against all age, and also playing senior baseball here in Oklahoma City, as well as senior softball. And it's been an absolute wonderful time. I didn't have time when I was in the legislature. But even guys my age, we were in a restaurant down in Panama City recently. I was in a tournament when we won the championship. It was incredible. These young ladies were laughing at us, thought we were softball players. Well, for a baseball player, that's an insult. You know, anybody. But they were laughing at us so hard. It was incredible. They said, do you guys use crutches? Is anybody in a wheelchair? Do you need oxygen? I mean, they were just having a ball. But believe it or not, we actually play some pretty good baseball. And as far as keeping yourself in shape and running around, Scott, I'm serious. Even if baseball is not football, it's not hockey. But if you're doing it regularly, you feel better, you have more energy, and it's a lot of fun. Believe me. It's like Little League all over again 50 years later.
I saw a story the other day where Spaceman came out of the crowd to throw a couple of innings. Did you see that, Bill Lee?
I didn't, but Spaceman, they call him that for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
man is real loony toony, and he's a disruptive figure in the clubhouse. I'll tell you that, because he was in the clubhouse with us. The man is nuts. I mean, he really is. Can you imagine what Don Zimmer had to go through with this guy?
I just can't imagine it. They throw that Eufus ball up there occasionally.
By the way, your Reds ought to be ashamed of themselves.
I know. I've got a buddy named Doug Carroll, who's another Reds fan. I watch this stuff. I mean, the Major League Baseball. I mean, one thing about NFL, they print money. Okay, and the greatest player in Major League Baseball right now is Mike Trout, in my opinion. And there'll be the average Oklahoma City sports fan will know 50 NBA players before they'll know who Mike Trout is. They'll know 100 NFL players before they know who Mike Trout is. And it's just a shame. MLB, it's a circular firing squad, you know.
Hey, interesting. Well, just a thought, Scott. It's your show. Get on one of the executives from the Oklahoma City Dodgers. The way they treat minor league players is hideous. Even with the revisions that they've made, what they do to minor league players in this day and age is not right. I'd be interesting to hear a podcast with him trying to defend how they treat their minor league, how they pay them, et cetera, et cetera. I would love to get on and debate somebody. I don't care who it is, because I've done some research, and it's just shameful how minor league players are treated.
It sounds like a baseball podcast to me.
It does, yeah. But anyway, let me ask you a question. Do you think the Democrats in this state have a chance to come back and win anything? When was the last time a Democrat won a statewide race?
That would be two-term Governor Brad Henry.
Henry, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many years ago was that?
A long time.
That was 2008, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was 14 years ago. Is the last time a Democrat won a major political race in Oklahoma.
Congressman Boren might be the last. I'm not really sure whether their terms ended.
That may be, but that was down there in the 1st district. Do you see any chance in this United States Senate race of any Democrat? Because I guess someone has already announced, right?
Congresswoman Horn is going to probably be your party standard bearer. Listen, she's a winner. And she won a seat that was, in a red county, but she got overwhelmed by the red wave in this last election.
And they gerrymandered that state this time. And by the way, I told the speaker, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, that they would do exactly what they did. And I saw him recently, and he's like, I said, Mr. Speaker, do you recall denying to me what you were going to do with that district? And you did exactly what I thought you'd do. Of course, they carved up Oklahoma County, put some of it there, some of it here. But I just cannot see a Democrat winning anything, especially in a rural area or statewide, for years to come.
Well, that's why they played the game, right, Richard?
I guess. By the way, back to this bond thing real quick. I'll be honest with you. There are other solutions. I know Brian and Kevin are going to disagree, but this is too easy a solution for the county commissioners to come up with this for a vote in June, Scott. I know I'm in the minority, and let me assure you, Brian and Kevin, this thing is going to pass. No sense losing sleep over it. The chamber will spend all tolls of money on TV with advertising. It'll get done, and a new jail will be built. But it is a tax increase, and if anybody runs against you guys, I would use that against you.
Okay, we'll put it to them. We'll let them answer that question. Richard Moore said it was a thrill of a lifetime to have you and Colby back on Sunday, and we're not done with that.
It was. It was a lot of fun.
Leader Eccles and Mr. Dunnington have tough schedules too, and so when they do, we're going to plug in retro. And so great to see you, Richard.
You too, Scott. And by the way, we need to go see a game downtown, and come join us playing ball. By the way, we're all terrible, so what the heck? You're probably better than we are.
Could I just be a designated runner or something?
You do whatever you want. Come on.
If I get to second base. All right, Richard Morissette. By the way, how many years were you in the legislature?
I was in the legislature, well, for the full 12, from 04 to 016. And I have to tell you, thank God for term limits, because I didn't believe it at first. But I have to say, after a while, you get enmeshed out there and you think it's the whole universe. Then you find out, Scott, you know what? It really isn't. And there's life after the legislature.
Richard Morissette, great American. Good to see you, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Scott. Say hello to that beautiful wife of yours.
I'll do that. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a good time down there.
Thanks very much. Bye, Richard. All right, so that's it. I want to thank Commissioner Brian Mon, Barry Mangold for leading off the show, and Richard Morissette is the cleanup hitter tonight, talking all about this bond issue. Richard brings up some interesting points that we'll put to him, and we'll be talking to commissioners. And we always appreciate our viewers on News 9, News on 6, and Mitchell Talks. We'll see you Wednesday night. Jeff Dismich, we've got an interesting show lined up. We'll be talking more about this particular issue, but also Dino Lawley and Ryan Welton. We're going to be talking about what happened the last couple of weeks in Hollywood. Dino Lawley has spent a lot of time with Bruce Willis and Will Smith, and we're going to talk about some of the politics behind what you saw recently. So that's Wednesday on our next episode, which will be 7 p.m. Wednesday, right here on News 9, News on 6, and Mitchell Talks. This is Scott Mitchell from Beavers Bend, Oklahoma. Thanks to Jerry and Shay Isbell for the great hospitality down here. And we're going to come back to Oklahoma City tomorrow. In the meantime, have a great evening, everyone.